So this video is going to be about the Activision Microtransactions patents. Now, first of all, some of you may know what this is and are wondering what it's got to do with World of Warcraft. My content's really to do with World of Warcraft. Although I can sometimes stray into more general gaming themes, I am actually doing this video as it links to World of Warcraft. Some people may know what it is at all and want to know what it is, so I'm going to explain that. What has happened basically is Activision. Now, bear in mind, Activision is the company that owns Blizzard. Now, I don't want to be too alarmist here. I'm going to say straight from the start, because I know what some people are going to be thinking. First of all, we have no real evidence that Activision are, in an overbearing way, changing the way Blizzard do things. As far as we know, Blizzard are sort of allowed to do their own thing. That seems to be how it is. So that's pretty good. Secondly, this is affecting microtransactions. Now, World of Warcraft does have an online store, but it's cosmetic stuff and services, things like that on there. It's not really pay to win. Now, some people, I mean, there's shades of grey on this, aren't there? You can argue the fact that it's possible with real life money to buy a WoW token, as I sometimes do, which you can trade for real gold in the game, and then allows you to buy very high BOEs, like high item level BOEs, is sort of a pay to win for many characters, the sort of characters that are not going to be able to easily get the best gear in the game by doing the content that rewards it. Okay, sure, there's a certain element of that. But it's not like you can go onto the store and buy powerful armor. You can't go onto the store and buy tier armor or legendaries or anything like that. Doesn't mean to say that this would never come into the game, but at the moment it doesn't. World of Warcraft charges a monthly subscription, which everyone has to pay or at least raise the gold to get the WoW token. But Blizzard love that too. Because at the end of the day, when I buy a WoW token with real life money, which I do, and put it on the auction house, I'm buying it for an amount that's double a monthly subscription. So every time someone uses real game gold to, I keep saying real game gold as if there's some fantasy game within it, the game gold in order to get the WoW token, Blizzard are getting twice as much money as if they just paid for a monthly subscription. But this system, of course, given that Activision have patented it, they have seemed to have gone to pains to say it does not exist in any of the games at the moment. But then you have to ask yourself, why file the patent? There's only really two reasons. One, someone came up with the idea, everyone else went, that's a stunning idea, we'd better patent it. You know, just for this, just so that they've got it. Maybe it's so that if ever they did decide to do something microtransaction, if someone else had patented it ahead of them, they might get into trouble. So maybe it's just for the sake of ownership of this system. Or maybe it is to use in the future. Just because it's not in the games now doesn't mean it's not going to be. So how does it work? So what we've got here is a bit of a flowchart which shows it in brief. And the idea, the way this works, and you can see it's mostly going to work well in PvP games or PvP aspects of games. But you could sort of suggest ways in which it could be worked in PvE as well. So what happens is you decide that you've got some items that you want to sell on your online store. These are items that can make your powerful more character. We're not talking about cosmetic items. Things that make your character more powerful. So what you want to do is you want to generate some desire on the part of the player base to have this item. So you show it in action. So you pair this person, you deliberately, whenever there's some so-called random matchmaking part of the game, it's not random at all. The matchmaking is, the randomness is largely removed. You are deliberately paired with someone who has this item. And that player, of course, will use the item. And it will become obvious to the first player that, oh, that's a really good item. Where did you get it from? Got it on the online store. The desire then will be to, oh, I'll get that as well. Buy it on the online store. So it works through here. So you match these players together. Player 1 sees the awesome item. Player 2 is using the awesome item. Player 1 wants the item. Do they buy the item? This is the crux part at the bottom. If they don't buy the item, then they again are going to match them with players that have the item. Now, in a PvP setting, this is where it's really bad, because that means you're against the player with the really powerful item. So you're going to keep losing. They're deliberately they're not going to randomly matchmake you. They're actually deliberately going to matchmake you with someone who has the item, who's likely to blow your head to kingdom come with this thing because you're too stubborn to buy it. So let's say you do buy the item. So what happens then? Do you get to enjoy the game? Not really, because the random matchmaking is still out the window, because now you have the item. So they will use you as a mule You are now going to be matched with people who don't have the item to try and sell it to them. See what I mean? So now you're still... Okay, you could argue it's a more enjoyable scenario because you're now going to win in all likelihood, or you've got a much better chance of it at any rate. But nonetheless, you create this system where you're still not getting a fair matchmaking system. You are being used to try and entice someone else into buying the item. It's a very deliberate manipulation of what the players would feel is a random matchmaking system just to sell stuff. And microtransactions are inherently detested by large sections of the player base just to show what people's reactions would be, I think. Just let's suggest in World of Warcraft now. So at the moment, what's one of the big things we have in Legion? We have legendaries. Let us suppose, just with normal transactions, let's just test the water here. How do you feel about transactions in general? So let's test the water. So the legendaries, we know we've got two types of legendary. We've got the utility legendaries, like Pride as Ceph as a Secret, and as well as ones that might be more specific to individual armor types or even specs. You know those ones. They're the ones that sometimes they're all right, sometimes they're quite nice, but generally speaking, what you want are the throughput legendaries, the ones that Blizzard said were the big problem. So let's say there was a future version of World of Warcraft. Now, I'm not saying this is imminent, but let's just say for the sake of argument. And the legendaries you could get in game were all the utility legendaries. But let's say on the online store, there were the throughput legendaries available. So how do you feel about that straight away? Let's say legendaries, I'll put it into the for the largest group, let's talk in US dollars. Let's say each of these legendaries was available for $50. Don't have to buy it. Don't need it. But it's there on the online store. How do you feel about that? A lot of people wouldn't be very happy at all. Now let's look at it this other way. So you put these things on the online store. Now let's say that they keep matching you in groups, in dungeon groups, things like that, with people who do have the items, and you're always getting beat on the damage meters. But as I say, in a PvE sense, it's really all about the microtransactions. But then you do it in a PvP sense. Let's say you do arenas. Let's say you have an arena team of 3s or something like that, and you're careless enough not to have one of these legendaries that would be really powerful for you. And then let's say the game kept matching you against teams that did have these legendaries. And they'll keep doing it until you buy them. And then when you buy them, they'll match you against the weaker ones who don't buy it as well. So the system will also lose its integrity. If there's any sort of leaderboard or anything like that for PvP, the game completely loses its integrity because its first priority is not to match you with people who should be of roughly the same ability. Its first priority is to sell merchandise on the online store. Now, what to do about this? People will say, oh, what can you do about it? Same thing I think anyone can do in this situation. And actually, it's not even to contact the developers and say, don't do this, because apart from anything else, like I said, especially for World of Warcraft, there's no evidence that this would come into the game. Like I said, I really don't think Blizzard would want to do it. Anyone working at Blizzard would want to do it. But we know there are things in the game now that are only in the game because the people in charge of the money insist that it's in the game. Okay, we know that the developers have to put some things in purely because of, we need money. And also, Activision do own Blizzard, although they may be giving them a light touch at the moment, doesn't necessarily mean that they couldn't, if they saw massive profitability in this, that they couldn't insist that something like this was implemented into all of the Blizzard games, as well as into the other games Activision own as well. And again, it may be the sort of thing that doesn't come around for a few years, but, may eventually, or it may not. But it may still hit some of the games you're playing as well anyway. So those are my thoughts on it anyway. I think this is utterly reprehensible. In fact, I've seen a couple of other people talk about it as well in general terms, mostly linked to the PvP games, of course, because that's what this is really designed for, you feel. I haven't seen anyone even give a neutral response to it. I think it's proper outrage. So what would you do about it? You don't contact the game company themselves. I think this is something that actually needs governments to get involved. And I'm not saying ban it. You can't ban something like this. But I do feel that this is one of those situations where you ought to have something mentioned on the game and to get some information out there so people are aware that there is something in the game that is deliberately trying to get you to pay for this. Because apart from anything else, I think it's false advertising. Because if you think you're in a matchmake system and that's designed to try and pit you against people of roughly equal ability, whereas in actual fact, you're being pitted against people who either they're going to try to get you to use your online store-bought items to impress them, or the other way around, get someone to impress you with online store-bought items. In actual fact, you're deliberately being mismatched. Either way. So I'll finish it there. Those are my thoughts anyway. Let me know what your thoughts are in the comments below. Thanks very much for watching, and until next time, I'll see you later.